Alright folks, so we have ground this up to 1200. I've buffed it with green compound, and then I wiped it off with degreaser, water, and alcohol twice. And then I wiped it off with just a plain cloth, and then I let it sit for 20 minutes to make sure it's dry. And what we're going to do next is open our ferric chloride here. And as I'm looking, I'm going to need a clamp. Give me 1 second. Alright, so ferric chloride comes in a tube from Radio Shack, at least this is where mine comes from. And you can do it in all sorts of different concentrations and whatnot. I couldn't tell you what mine is because I just fill it up when it's getting low. And I can tell what if I need to replace it by how the hamon looks. This is brand new, so I'm just gonna kind of float it in here. I don't need to go any further than just my blade. We're gonna let it sit in there for, I don't know, 15-20 seconds. I'll pull it out and check it out. Alright, so what's going on is the acid is going to interact differently with the two crystal structures of the steel. We got the hardened part and the tougher part. They react differently when they're in the acid, and what we do is we get this sweet pattern that pops out. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to get my water over here. And I like to rinse it off first. You have to neutralize this or it'll continuously just eat away at your blade. Okay. So now, super important, I'm not going to touch this. I gotta make sure all the yellowy liquid's off of here. Alright, so we have our etch. You can kind of see the lighter parts are the more tough and the darker parts are the hardened parts. So it's actually going to flip-flop when I wipe it off. This is just the film built up by the acid. This will all come off, as you can see a little bit there on my glove. So we're letting this kind of hang out for a minute and just get in the air. I'm going to put it right back in there. This is kind of a trial and error process. There's 1,000,001 ways to do it. This is, I mean, I guess the only real process of it is putting it in some kind of acid. You can use vinegar. I've seen people use pool chemicals and heat, all sorts of different things. I like the acid. I think it's pretty easy. It's simple. It's foolproof. Make sure you got good acid. You got to have a base, which I have ammonia here, which obviously is what WA stands for. Should be pretty good now. I might even do this 3 or 4 times, depending on how defined of an etch I want to get. Okay. So now, I'll put my lid on there just in case. This is the ammonia, which will neutralize everything. And see all that black coming off of there? Alright, so we have successfully etched the blade. I'm going to turn the camera off and we'll get set up somewhere else, and then I'll start cleaning up the blade and you can actually see what's going on. Got the blade all cleaned up, or dried off rather. It still needs cleaned up. That's what we're going to do now. I like to just hit both sides with a little bit of WD-40. This is like a really sensitive exposed thing right now. It just got eaten up by the acid, and if you just let it sit here for too long, it will just corrode over and start to rust immediately. So a little oil is going to help preserve that, but it's also going to help remove all the particles with this. This is just 1200 grit film belt. This is just a used thing. It got ripped. I don't know. It still had a lot of life left to it, so I cut it up and I use it to put my hand finishes on everything. So as soon as we just start to kind of really lightly rub this, it's going to be hard to see at the very, very beginning because of all the sludge kind of builds up from the oxidized parts being rubbed off here. Give it a wipe. Really start to see that coming through. Now I won't get this on the first etch. A little sand and butter in there. I will not get this on the first etch. I'll take a few cycles of buff, etch, rinse, repeat. But eventually, we're going to work this down back to a near mirror finish. And kind of, that's getting to where we want to be. Now my favorite part with the acid is going on right up here at the tip. What I like to do is kind of give it a wash and then a real quick little, I'm barely touching it. I'm just moving it along, and all it does is it hits the high spots. Do it on this side. Let's pretend like we didn't have a hamon that we're trying to pop out of here. I'll hit the plunge line a little bit, right up there at that really small area up there. But man, like that's badass. You get those really cool highlights, nice dark areas. Playing around with the finishes is the funnest part. I really like doing a forced patina. That's what it's called when you go through and acid etch these beforehand, because this is carbon steel. If you come back and see this thing in 50 years, like, it's gonna look like this. It's gonna be all dark. People's hands have oils and acids and all sorts of crap on them, so it's gonna eventually darken up. You should see some of my personal knives. I mean, like, this is all, that's rust, but you can see that it's darkened. It was at one time very nice and shiny and new, but that's what happens when you use them. So, we've got a fair amount of polishing left to do. I just wanted to give you kind of a sneak peek on, and it's going to be this for hours and hours. I've got sanding blocks and the whole thing set up that I can't film very well. It's just sitting here in front of me for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and I'm going to get this really nice and smooth, and everything, all my lines are going in this direction, and I'll figure out how I want to do it, and we'll come back and start working on the handle after that.